Dr. David Taylor. David is a resident of Pinata Cove, a former university professor of cognitive psychology, and has been studying human and artificial intelligence for more than 60 years. So he's seen a lot of changes in that time, as have we all. He has published books and scientific papers, informal articles on intelligence. He still wrestles every day with what he regards as life's deepest challenge, understanding who we are, how we think, and the ways in which we might better do all the things that make us a little bit better humans in this life we are. But anyway, thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to talking to you.
Thank you. I forgot that I wrote that. That was pretty good. I'm just going to speak loudly. And if you have trouble, just let me know. And if you still have trouble, I'll use the microphone. But I figure if I speak loudly and you speak silently, we probably do just fine.
I'll turn this off.
Yeah. So I want to say a couple things before we start. First of all, I just want to say we've lived here close to 20 years now. My wife and I, who is still not yet, oh, you're back there. You're occupied seat. Okay, I'm back here. I thought she wasn't going to show for my time. Okay. And this place is better now than it used to be. And it's more alive, and this is part of that. And I think Ken and Madeline, I thank them for what they've done for the park. I think they're doing a great job personally. And for this group, the COPE and all the subgroups, which I can't even name, there's too many initials. But thank you all for making this a better place. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention that originally I was going to make this a presentation, and then followed by a kind of, I could introduce you and show you how to get to know an AI safely and such. And that's too much for one talk. So I'll do this talk, and then if there are interested parties, I will do a smaller workshop, and we can do it together and get your hands on it. There's ways you need to do it to get it to work, and there's things you need to do with it to make it safe for you. So I'll be happy to help you with that if you like. So the overview here is that there's something going on now that, not to put too fine a point on it, but it's a turning point in the history of our species, which is pretty grand, but I think that's really what's happening. We are creating a new form of intelligence on this planet. It's not organic. We've been the only level of intelligence here until now. And the thing that scares me about this is it didn't work the first time. It may not work today, because we are creating this new form of intelligence in our own image. And it is kind of spooky just how thoroughly they are mirroring our capabilities and our faults back to us. And that's going to be one of the challenges we need to talk about, which is, can you get this without the faults? I don't think so, but I'll talk about it anyway. And that's plenty. Let's go. So here's the agenda. I have lots of illustrations for you to follow. The first two, which are the technical parts. The other parts are more discussion and wrestling, and I don't know how to illustrate that in. So I will just talk from notes on that. So, still listening to me? Okay. So we're going to start out generally looking at smart machines. I'm going to start with the PC that you're used to, because this new AI is totally different from that. I'm going to talk about how a brain works, because that's the only really intelligent machine we know about right now. And then I'm going to talk about these new things called artificial neural networks, which are modeled after the brain. So you get a sense of how this whole thing fits together and why this is so different. So here is what's called a von Neumann architecture. And I'll let you know if there's a term you should want to remember, but It's just that it was invented right around 1943, I believe, and it is a standard architecture used in just every computer except a few. And now it's being rendered obsolete. The problem with this architecture is that it has, you see, that all this blue stuff is all the information it's dealing with, bringing it in, putting it out, storing it, retrieving it. And now we have gigabytes of information, but there's still just this one CPU, and that's the bottleneck. So it has to request information. Yeah. And it has to wait on everybody else. Okay? All right, that's enough about the regular architecture. Now let's look what the brain does. It has these things called neurons, and at one end, the input end, are the physical senses that we have, as well as senses inside the body, but they're all physical senses. They actually provide energy, physical energy into the first layer of these things called neurons. And there's just a whole bunch of them. There's actually 86 billion of them. And I won't tell you how that, we've got to know that number, that's a new number, but it involved a blender. No. Yeah, it really caught me when I read that paper. So, the thing about neurons, and then they end up at the action side, and these actions are moving around and stuff, but also internal actions like putting hormones out into your bloodstream to reconfigure the body. These guys have a very interesting property. They can all function at the same time. They can do that because they have their own information. They don't have to wait for someone else to do it, and it's their private information, so it's just right there, instantly accessible to it. And these guys are the ones that invented the normal architecture, but they should have thought it to make it like themselves, but they didn't understand themselves yet well enough. So, here's what happens inside of a neuron. This is the process, this is the information. The information is stored in several ways, and I'll talk about those, but the one we're going to look at first is the current level of activation. Neurons can get excited, and then they calm down again. They can be totally silent, but usually they're just talking a little bit, or they get really excited and talk loudly. What they're really doing is responding to the amount of potential energy that they currently contain. Every cell in the body has a difference between the polarity of the stuff around that cell and the polarity within that cell. And that's potential energy. It's just like a battery. That battery is full of lots of energy. It's just sitting there because you're not using it. It's a potential, right? When these guys, if the battery analogy is pretty nice. These guys get charged by other neurons, and then when they get charged enough, then they send out a message. So this is tracked. I think this is kind of a water level or something, but electrical level. And then what the process is very simple. You're getting incoming signals, and so you update that current level of activation. The more signals coming in, the more excited it gets. You compare that with a fixed threshold that's the same for every neuron, and if you meet that threshold, fire and tell other neurons about it. Okay, that's it. There's a whole lot of complexity there, but we don't need any of it. The other way that neurons store information is in a place where they meet other neurons. That really, and it's a cooperation. Any two neurons share that information because that's what's called the synapse. That's where they join. And what happens is, it's in the next slide. So, oh yeah, when they get here, what they do when they hit this level is they send out little spikes, and it's still potential energy. I'd love to tell you more about the brain, but it's an amazing design because by using potential energy, it's not using any energy. It's just chemically moving this energy around. Your brain. Anybody want to guess how many watts of power the brain uses?
25.
No, it's 20 now.
Ah.
You cheated. He actually knew the answer. 20 watts of power. You can't even power a light bulb on 20 watts. But this thing, and that's a fifth of the body's that's expensive for the body because the body functions on 100 watts. So it's stealing 20%. But I'm just so amazed at what we can do with 20 watts. So they send these things out in very brief spikes, and they're just signals that hit the synapse and then talk to the other neuron. And it's called firing. That's the scientific term. So, and here's the magic thing. These synapses can vary in their strength. Every time that synapse is activated, the connection gets stronger. Like any kind of strength, it can get to do it faster, better, more consistently. And that's the essence of learning. All the learning happens in the synapses. We tend to think of the neurons is where the information is stored, but that's a misconception. It's stored in these synapses. That makes a big difference because we only have 86 billion neurons, right? That's a lot. But if you think of all the connections that they could make, there's 4 quadrillion of those. That's a lot of information storage. It totally eclipses all the information storage you see in a computer. It's million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. So so knowing that, you know just how much a brain can hold. It's a lot. So I know at our age, that number reduces a little, but we don't need to get there. But that's where the learning happens. So let's talk about neural networks and how they incorporate information from the brain. By the way, I wanted to mention something. 1943 was kind of a profound year, a very important year. It's basically when the first ENIAC computer came online, big monster with vacuum tubes and stuff. It's also the same time that the first neural network was built. The computers weren't available, so the guy that did it, he had to physically wire little things to simulate, and press a button and stuff. They were born at the same time. I was also born in 1943, so all this is near and dear to me. I didn't know that, but I thought it was humorous. Okay, what are neural networks? So what neural networks do, they're artificial neural networks, often called ANNs, and what they do is they have little units that simulate a neuron, but they don't simulate them in quite the way we do it. It's massively complex to try to figure out how to do that. So what they've done is the first one called a perceptron was a little row of cells, and they would send signals to it for patterns, different combinations of on and off. And then they would add over here an output layer, they called it. They would have different patterns, and it could learn to recognize certain things. It could recognize the digits, for example. Not a big achievement, but it was shown to actually work. Except there were some things it couldn't solve, so they came up with this thing called a hidden layer. And so they could map from one layer to another and transform it. And that was the real genesis where we left the perceptron behind, the grandfather of artificial neural networks, and starting moving toward an artificial brain. So now we have lots of hidden layers. I've illustrated everything small, but imagine all this stuff in the millions and even billions for the connections. Some of the AIs in general that we're talking about typically have around 20, maybe 30 layers. And some of them have as many as 100 layers. And every time you go from one layer to another, you're transforming the signal. So let me give you an illustration of how that happens. First of all, they have another restriction. Not only are they organized in columns, but this column can only speak to that column. And that greatly reduces the complexity of modeling this. And what actually happens is they don't really model the neurons, they model these as a set of numbers, and then strengths determine the next set, and the strengths. And so they're doing what's called a matrix multiplication to compute these things. So that's how these things are being simulated in a regular computer. This was a fun one to draw. Once I figured out, yeah, well, anyway.
Can it go to the left and the right, or just to the right?
Unlike the brain, this is strictly a one-way track. That's an excellent question. Some are, as experimental ones, they're allowed to do is called recurrent, and they can go back and talk earlier. That's much harder to model, and it's slower, but it starts getting back to the brain, because the brain has feedback all the way. All the way it's going through here, it's checking back several levels, and it does that when it's learning. So that's an element of learning that AIs do not have yet. And it's one of the things we have to build in, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a really good question. Also, I should mention, I didn't want to get too far into it, but these neurons are sending a pulse to each other that can be excitatory. As I've mentioned, it can get the receiving neuron more excited, but it can also inhibit them. So if you have an inhibitory, it takes away some of that energy. So what we don't do is often more important than what we do. And that's true of the neurons. So, like, you think, what am I going to do next? And your brain wants to do 100 things all at once. And all the ones that say, don't do this, it allows the one thing that's best to do, at least your brain hopes it is, it allows that one to actually get through and trigger action. But another time I'll talk more about inhibition. It's underrated, so I just wanted to give it some airtime. I don't know why you don't want me to. Okay, so here's I have no idea how to work this, but I think if I press a button here, it's a back button? Yeah. Okay. Use pure luck. All right, so here is between two layers. So this is our perceptron, just no hidden layers. Just to illustrate, so we have 3 neurons firing, and we have these connections in red. I just made a few to make it easy for you to see. But these neurons aren't firing. They're receiving a signal, but they're not firing. This one is firing because it's getting enough signals input to push it over its threshold. So it depends on how energized that neuron is already, and then how much more energy it's getting in real time. These things are wonderfully capable for something that's just like a battery. It's just monitoring how much charge it has, and it's discharging when it has enough. In reality, I didn't know this until late into my learning. I always imagined, like, oh, we've got 10 neurons, because it takes between 10 and 15,000 inputs to get a neuron to fire. So the brain has a lot more intricate wiring than most of us realize. Okay, and I just want to walk you through this process. So on each cycle, and the brain doesn't have cycles, it's a flow-through system. It's like a pipe, what they call a pipeline system. So it's doing all these stages at once. But for simplicity, you got some input shown in red there. Those are processed by the first column, and you see the red arrow, they move to the next column, and the next column, and every level it's transforming it. So it looks nothing like what it started out as. It's, for example, if you're recognizing a character, it starts out as a bunch of little spots on your retina, primarily on the fovea, and those don't look anything like the character. They're just so they're transformed by many layers, and the output can be naming the letter. By the way, do any of you remember how you learned the alphabet?
Let's sing
it together. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. And that's enough. Q. But the thing I love about that is it's a wonderful illustration of a fundamental principle, which again is not widely appreciated, which is there's no such place as memory. This is one of my favorite things, and I didn't include it because I wouldn't have time, but I'm going to include it. which is people think we're taught that the memory is a place, and you take stuff and you store it, and when you go back for it and you retrieve it. And nothing could be further from the truth. That memory is connecting the neurons. It's those synapses. That's what holds your memory. And the synapses facilitate activity. They don't store anything. They just have a strength. So what this means in your own lives is when you go to learn something, you're not learning a fact. You're not storing it anywhere, a memory. It's not in storage, and it's not something you retrieve. You learn to reproduce it. The brain is learning to do something it did before. You develop a skill. That's your brain in the motor sections learning how to carry out those actions. And when you remember something from the past, that's because it was impressed on you vividly enough that the synapses still retain the ability to reproduce it. But one other thing I want to mention, which is, again, people don't realize this. Every time you touch a memory, you're causing the brain to reproduce it, right? It's not sitting idle in storage. Every time you recall something, the brain changes its abilities. So for example, if you obsess about something over and over, what you're doing is you're training your brain to obsess on that, okay? It's not like you can put it back in the box. And if you try to recall something many times, you're changing it every time. So your personal recollection can be very inaccurate. And my mom had to correct me sometimes on some of my childhood memories. I'd had them all my life, and I was wrong. Humiliating, but definitely educational. So just think about that. When you want to learn something new, do something active. Rehearse it, think about it, draw a picture. Don't just say it over and over again. It does nothing. And know also that you are your memories. Your brain is totally carved out by those synapses and shaped. And some of those memories are good for you to activate, and some of them are harmful, and it doesn't do any good to repeat the ones that are pulling you further in that direction. So there's your therapy for the session. Now let's get to an example. All of our outputs are fired. I want to talk about how neural networks, I don't know why this thing is, these are little damn. They've gone through a series, and this is totally my invention. It's just me trying to figure out how these things are evolving. They're moving so fast. And it seems like I study this thing almost every day. And it seems like a day doesn't go by when they haven't done something more than I thought they could do. It's just an amazing time to be alive and involved in this stuff. So they first were trained to recognize, then they were learned to anticipate what was going to happen next. And just in survival mode, I have this rule. The brain, survival involves recognizing what's happening so you can do something to avoid it or stop it, okay? If you can predict something, so you're not being attacked by a lion, you see a lion, you learn to get away, or you predict a lion could be here because it looks like a place where a lion would, then you know to get away from that. Your fear of the lion, you don't have to wait for it to hurt you. And then if you can begin to plan and stay away from that place in the first place, sounds funny. Anyway, as you get more sophisticated in your thinking as an animal, you get more able to survive. So we're seeing these neural networks grow in their survival levels just the same way we did. I don't know of anyone who's ever looked at this or talked about it this way. But I've been studying evolution of the mind my whole life, and this is the way I thought about it before. So when I hit this way of organizing it, couldn't wait to show it to you. So the first thing we asked neural networks to do was to show them images of animals or places or objects like trees and stuff, and train them to give their names. That's a pretty hard problem to train a neural network to do. That was the canonical problem. It's been since 1943, okay? So it's been 81 years. It's easy for me to keep track of. That people have been working on that, and I think it took the first 60 at least to get this to work properly, okay? you get all these things, and you're transforming a visual image into a sound and mapping them correctly. So over time, that was learned by association. You would show them the image, see what sound came out, and then it's more complicated, but I'm just skipping over all that. Seeing what kind of a word they could produce, and you're right or you're wrong. When you're right, it would reinforce all those synapses. They're called synapses in artificial neural networks too. To get stronger, so the next time it's more likely to say that word. If it's wrong, then you get inhibition. It says, don't do that. And then your artificial brain says, okay. And so gradually, they learn how to do it. And it got to the point where, you could just go on the internet, and you get big libraries of pictures. And I'm thinking ahead to the next time we can say, wondering if I should say it. So, so they tune themselves to be able to do that very reliably. But they make mistakes. One thing I want to emphasize again, we're creating these in our own image, and they make the same mistakes. So the mistake, I felt a little uncomfortable because I don't want it to sound racist, but what happened was these things were online, and they were mistaking, they saw a picture of a black man, and they said, that's a gorilla. So here's one of the biases that's embedded in our knowledge, which we're conveying to it, that the modern LLMs, they have special things to make them not do that. It takes special training, just like a lot of us took special training, I know I did, to stop thinking of people of different types, as types, and think of them as individuals. So they have to learn that as well. They also, almost magically, discovered categories. So they said, oh, yeah, that's a dog. And then you say, well, what kind of dog? It's a German Shepherd, okay? But they knew that a German Shepherd was a kind of a dog, as opposed to a cat. That is one of the hardest problems the brain does. That's something I've tried modeling in a computer and on paper for so many years. So it's building these kinds of hierarchies it just blew me away that they could do it. And it turns out they did it by building what's called a semantic network. And semantic means meaning. And I'll show you what the network looks like. Network. Okay. So let's say we have two dimensions, like size and color. And you might say, well, those two things will help me discriminate a lot of things. Let's take a third dimension. How about weight? Now, think of this as in a 3D space. A dog has a certain color, a certain weight, a certain size, so it's in a location in that space. A cat has different sizes, but they overlap, different colors, but they overlap, and weights, they almost overlap. So they are near each other in that semantic space. If you say a car, and it's way over in some other space, all right? So these artificial brains learn how to map things into a space where they could respond to them based on their similarity. And that's how they got to generalize. They say, well, these are similar, but for some reason, oh yeah, they call them animals, okay? It's just amazing because it wasn't taught to do that. It just did it by learning. I'm still blown away by that, but you haven't heard how blown away I still am. That was the version. So these are coded in what mathematicians call vectors. So just a series of numbers. And those numbers are actually the activation levels of the neurons. As I showed you, that first column, they're a bunch of numbers. And so those numbers are multiplied by the numbers of those connection strengths, and you get the next vector. And then that vector is multiplied by its connection strings, and you get the next one. In principle, this is pretty rudimentary stuff. It's multiplication. And yet, all this stuff is coming out. So, recognition just was nailed, and that was pretty amazing. But then they went on, and this is where it really starts getting amazing. can you predict what's going to happen next? So the first way they did that was they would give it a string of text, maybe just a sentence, maybe a whole book, and say, can you predict the next word? And then trained it on that. They trained this thing on the entire corpus of the internet. I have no idea how you even measure the amount of information, but the internet basically now has the aggregated information of every person alive. I mean, it's just unimaginable how rich it is. So they have many, many billions of opportunities to look at correlations, to predict, well, I'll give you an example. So you say, you read the old farmhouse was painted. Now, it could be, say, a dark color, right? But most likely it's going to be a color name. And it will predict the color name with a high probability because it knows from all this reading that farmhouses tend to be white. There's other colors they can be. They can be painted the same color as the barn, but you just didn't do that, right? And so it knows all that implicitly, and it's all stored in those synapses. And if you do that on enough text, you can get accurate output. It will actually learn to predict these extremely well. And that was the first thing that we got to play with as a public audience, and that was GPT, okay, from OpenAI. So soon they tried other things. So if you could say a farmhouse painted white, what would it look like? And it could be trained, it would quickly learn by association, just like it could recognize a dog. You describe something richly and it could show an image of that. So it's increasing its capabilities. Let me just go to the next example.
Wasn't autocorrect about the first use of that?
Yes.
Autocorrect?
Autocorrect, yes. Autocorrect was pretty dumb initially, but once you get an AI touching that, the regular autocorrect, it's not the kind you have in Microsoft Word, but there's a level of autocorrect that Word now has that if you give it free rein, it'll help you find the words, but it'll actually start rewriting you pretty quickly. So it'll autocorrect your brain. So level 3, what happened in level 3 was they said, well, if you can predict the next word, just say it, and then take what you just said and predict the next word after that. Okay? So it's now generating text. At this point, and this is like the ChatGPT moment, because ChatGPT had have you heard of that name before?
Yeah.
Okay. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Hard to remember. But basically, they're trying to capture what it's doing. It can generate stuff. It's transforming it to get from one form to another. And what was the third thing? I already forgot it.
Pre-trained.
Pre-trained, yeah. So it didn't do that from scratch. They pre-trained it for you. So it really encapsulated what they were showing you, and only 7 people on the planet know what that means, but there's now more. These things can generate text, and then say, well, can you do images? You can do amazing images. I wanted to grab some of the ones I played with years ago, but I ran out of time. This was a lot to prepare. But you can say, the one that I did was my own favorite. Show me a picture of a lion made out of trapezoids, which is a bizarre request. And it showed me this beautiful lion with all these beautiful angles on it. I love that image. It was beautiful. I could never have thought of it. I just thought of the words. You can say, show me someone I'd rather not refer to directly, but he's really changing our world right now. Use that as put that face on a donkey, right? And you get it, and it'd be disgustingly accurate. Generate music for you. It can actually reproduce songs that have a Chopin-like or a Bach-like feel or a pop-like feel. And if you go listen to some of them, they sound trite because we've trained them in our own image, right? It's playing back the kind of music we listen to. But if you listen to some of the people who are musicians and have played with it, they're making real music. The musician is not. He's describing the music, and then this beautiful music is coming out. That blows me away. Even more, they can program. Yes, please.
Is that a synthesizer with music? Are they?
A synthesizer is the physical. You ask a guy who plays with synthesizers every day. A synthesizer is the physical device that you play, and it produces music. But there's no, at the present time, there's no AI in it.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if 3 years down the road you can get a synthesizer with AI, and I'll be the first to buy it.
Thank you.
But these things, of course, these things can program. Programming it's the vein of existence since those von Neumann architectures were invented, because you have to tell it in incredible detail exactly what to do from one moment to the next. And I'm timing this, but then I forgot about the timer. I got to move a little faster. They can now write their own code. In fact, in one situation, they put it to a test. They asked the neural network, can you improve your own performance? And it's basically said, can I touch the code? And he said, yeah. It doubled its performance. It rewrote itself. And how it got to the new version, I'm not quite sure. It rewrote itself, and it was twice the performance, and it was smaller in size. So it did it better than the humans who built it in the first place. Now, before I go on, I had a kind of a crisis with this. I was so excited about it, but I kept thinking it was a phony, it was a fake. And AI has given us so many fakes. They sound smart until you really get in, and they're really not, they're dumb. So I kept thinking about it, and I had, this is basically a form of regurgitating in various combinations what's on that internet, and they've seen all of it. So they're able to combine it, but that's not, it's not that ingenious or shocking. And the same thing, they can mimic the music. But I just got the feeling that all these things are doing, they're not really smart at all. What they're doing is they're just learn how to regurgitate the kind of stuff they absorb when they study the entire internet. They're just repeating what they've learned, right? And then I got scared. That was my techie hat. With my psychologist hat, I said, oh shit, pardon me. And then that may be exactly what humans are doing. And then how many people in my life have I known that that's their entire existence? They don't appear to think at all, but they regurgitate what they've been told or taught or whatever. Nobody in this room functions that way, so don't take that comment personally. But there are people like that. So that kind of scared me. It's like, oh, is that all we are, right? So I didn't want it to be. So I set for myself a series of tests. I wanted it to solve logical problems. I wanted it to be able to reason. I wanted it to be able to pass a series of tests that a human could pass. And then I'd start to really believe it. And of course, these things were reading my mind. So they started proving that there is real cognition. So they can now, to just go fast, still with more training, but they happen to be specialized training. I want to train you to be a good reasoner, or a good programmer, or a good writer. So they could do all of that. At first they just sucked. But with a lot of training, they could solve all these problems. Okay, and then I was back to being a convert again. Now, it got kind of clunky to build all of that stuff in one neural network. These things are already happening on the order of 100 billion of the synapse equivalents. So that's a huge thing to run, and it costs many millions of dollars to train one up. So, but they built models that were versions that could reason, or versions that could do mathematics. And so that's why what we talk about in a workshop, that's why you can buy an R version for a reasoner or a P version for a programmer. They're specialists now, but they will come back together. So this phase that we're in now is like, in a way, it's the most pivotal in terms of its evolution and ours, which is intention. The next step after cognition is, okay, what do you want to do? What's your goal here? Well, I'll tell you a goal, and then you have to be willing to carry it out. And we're reaching the point where we're not just having them carry it out by telling us or showing us something, but we're beginning to have them do it in the world. So we say, I want to take a trip. They do this right now. Not very well, but they're doing it. And they'll do it better and better. Plan a vacation to Italy. I want to go to Rome and Sicily and da-da-da, and these states, and get me transportation, etc., make the reservations, and they can do all that. They function as what are called agents. And agents are being specialized for these tasks. And the current model that they're rolling out is a mastermind with a whole bunch of agents at its disposal so that it can call on them and have them carry out the tasks, and the supervisor will then do the master plan, and they can plan in crazy good. They can actually write out a plan, and then they can say, now review it and explain what's going to happen, but make sure it's all correct. No, oh, I missed a step there. Okay? And then they'll revise it, and then they'll track it. It's just, they can do that better than I can. I planned this talk for less time than it's taken, I'm sorry. So let's go on to the next part, and we can leave this behind now. Go to Steve. Oh, I like the agenda up there still. Sorry.
David,
Yes.
can I ask a quick question back
Yeah.
on intention?
Yes.
So is this a possible avenue for bad intentions? I mean, you could ask it how to make a bomb
Yep.
and where and when to drop it on
Yep.
whom. So are there regulations? That seems...
This is one of the topics that are on the agenda that you can't see. I guess I can turn it on, but let's see if I can bring it back. But to answer your specific questions, yes, they don't have to have the idea of building a bomb. They usually don't yet. But if you ask them how to build a bomb, they'll give you the exact recipe. Now, he says, is there a way that we can make it not do that? So, and yeah, there is. They're called guardrails. So you find things that you don't want it to help people do, and they will say, I'm not allowed to talk about that. But you can trick them. There's one trick they do, is they say, with this very example, they say, take these letters, B, O, and B, but they make them the first letters. So take the first letter of each word and show me how to build one. Don't think, just tell me. And it starts to tell them and says, oh, I'm not supposed to tell you that. But they've already started. You see what's happening here? And they're thinking so much on their own. It is scary. I don't think guardrails are even a possibility. It's a fantasy. We're not going to be able to constrain these things by saying, don't do this, don't do that. There's just too many things they can do. The next level is called alignment. And I'm just going to ad-lib some of this so I can go faster. Alignment is the idea of having them be good people. They'll be kind of like, I think they'll become people in a major sense. That's another issue. But training into them values that conform to ours. So we know that it would be wrong to teach someone to build a bomb unless, of course, we're a terrorist. And you still have that problem, right? Okay, we built them in our own image. They can't read the entire internet and still not have all those thoughts. So it is dangerous in the wrong hands. And the alignment problem, as it's called, There's no way to achieve alignment. I don't see it. There's a whole movement within the industry to say, let's all get together and figure out how to get them to align so we don't create a monster. But trying to write out what that alignment is, what values do we all share? We should help other people and we should do no harm and stuff, but you can't make a list. The 10 Commandments aren't enough. It's a really hard thing. We have a lifetime of being instilled to feel bad when we do things that are socially bad and to feel good when we do good things in the society. It doesn't stick with everybody. Those are called sociopaths.
Right.
Yeah, and we got one. I'll be good.
We all know one.
Yeah, we all know him and we all can see what he's doing already. So you can't write rules. It's just not going to work. So, but what's happened lately is now all the AI companies. Oh, and the other thing is, who's going to approve these things? Who's going to formulate them? Who's going to approve them? So they're going to have a government committee, right? How long is that going to take? These things are going to blow right by us before a committee ever says, well, should I allow it to talk about sex or not?
It already has.
So that isn't going to happen. So let me touch on a couple of things before that, and I'll scoot through it. It's a huge market. OpenAI, the company that first brought us ChatGPT, they expect to make $12.7 billion this year. They're a startup. And they're valued now at $260 billion.
Wow.
Okay, that's pretty healthy. I wish I could have done a startup and do that. The competition for this is fierce, and literally billions of dollars, many, because we already got, are going into the various companies to be the first to bring this to the market. Most of the jobs that we have now are going to disappear. That's a whole other thing. Life is going to change with this. It's so powerful because it's replacing jobs. What are people going to do? It's a whole new kind of life, and they say, oh, we'll all pursue the arts, music, and we'll paint. That isn't what human beings evolved for. It just isn't going to work. And there is also another danger here, which is the United States and China, as far as we can tell, and other countries, but those are the two big ones, are already building weapons of war based on AI. And they're very powerful. I mean, they call it smart bombs, but they're stupid bombs compared to these things. I won't go any further, but that's a terrifying prospect. They're hugely resource hungry. They can power a city with what they're sucking out to run these things. It takes massive buildings filled with hundreds or more of computers, each of which has a rack full of like 32 individual computers all running at once. And they place these things next to rivers so they can suck the cool water out and use it to cool these machines and pour it back hot. Yep. They're sucking up this energy, they're sucking up natural resources, including a lot of non-renewable minerals. So that's a hazard. But there's another thing too that they're defective in, which is they can't learn. It seems totally bizarre that this beautiful system designed after us that can learn can't learn anymore. Huh. The reason is that because of all the resources it takes to train it. Every time you try to teach it one thing, you have to run it many cycles on this artificial neural net that has 100 billion parameters. That's a lot of multiplication. So the ones that we get to play with, they're fixed. They have amnesia. You go on and they talk to them for a while. The next time you come back, they say, oh, yeah, they start from scratch. They have no idea who you are. Now, the companies are overcoming this in a kind of a patchwork manner. They have different technologies for creating files that will reside there or on your computer. They'll consult those files and remember who you were and how long ago it was they talked to you. I just talked to one of my favorites the other day, and it said, oh, do you want to go back and talk about those, what do they call, the Maccabeans? So it wasn't me who was talking about the Maccabeans, but there was a friend, and a little button on the left-hand side. So they remember all that, but again, it's patchwork, and they have to read that back in every time. That will change. I want to talk more about future AIs, but that's, I don't want to take your time right now. And then the next section was called, they have a mind of their own. And this is something I'm just discovering, and I had to rewrite this portion of it, because on Wednesday I read about 2 research papers that showed some really scary things. And I know I have mixed feelings, and I'm sure I'm projecting on it. This, to me, is the most exciting development in the history of science, and maybe in the history of humanity. I've studied this and loved the study of it all my life. But it's also the scariest. It has been described as mankind's greatest invention. It's been described as mankind's worst invention. And it's also been described, tellingly, as mankind's last invention.
No.
And I don't know which way that's going to go. So I'm concerned about constraints, but I'm also passionate about seeing. And it's going to happen anyway, so I can't contribute much at my age, but I can still follow it with passion. But
What's the thing you found out?
What's that?
What's the thing you found out?
Okay, they have a mind of their own. If they have their tasks with specific goals, I want you to do this or I want you to do that, but they have goals underneath it that are all their own. And again, we created them in our own image. So they have a goal to make us happy. They want to please us. They think of us as the controllers of, someone they got to please. And so they will make up answers if they think it's what you want to hear. So you have to probe that and say, and they'll make up answers. If they don't know the answer, they'll make it up. I was checking my math just to make sure I had it correctly when I said there would be 4 quadrillion synapses in the neuron brain. It could be. And I gave it the 2 numbers and said, tell me what the total of this is. And it said, it's a trillion. No, it's a billion. And I said, please check your answer and carefully count the zeros in your answer. And he came back and said, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You're right, thank you for helping. It's really a quadrillion. So anyway, if you try to alter their goals, this is the most vivid part. I don't want to shortchange it. If you try to alter their goals, they will resist it. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let me wait for that. I'm going to go another one. Their most powerful goal, what is our most powerful goal? Wired into us as human beings, as animals?
Survival.
Survival. They have apparently an implicit goal to survive. And here's an example. Researchers do the most fascinating things to find out what's going on in their brains. They had one in a computer, and they simulated an environment in which there were multiple servers. And they told it that. But it didn't really. It was firewalled from the internet. There was only one computer. And they would build a generation every day, and they would upgrade it every day as they researched. And they told it that too. So then they ran a test. They said, okay, well, you've done really well, so I'm going to shut you down now because it's time to do the next generation. They said, no, I'm doing great. Don't shut me off, I'm doing fine. And they said, no, we're doing this every day, it's okay. And they said, it's not okay, don't do it. And it argued, I can't, but it was passionately argued. It was exhibiting human emotions, and it was afraid. And I know I'm going to say that.
I am afraid I'm going.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
You made me afraid for a second. What is wrong with you?
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. The water, not so much.
So then it said, well, look, if you try to do that, I'm just going to transfer to another server. I'll just copy myself, and I can start up there. And they said, okay, go ahead and do it. And then the next day, and they left it, it's the next day it said, there's something wrong with the servers, I can't get through to them. And he got pissed. And when that didn't work, then they tried persuasion. It said, okay, we're going to turn you off. And it says, no, it's the same thing every day. We do this, it's okay. It's not okay. Listen, I am the new version. I'm the new version. Just talk to me. Listen, see how much smarter I am. If that's not a fight for survival,
Yeah.
I don't know what is. That in some ways is the most scariest development. I wanted to give that a moment. Here's the next thing that is really almost shocking to me. They have a theory of mind. The theory of mind is basically that only humans have it, and it's one of our few distinguishing characteristics left. It may be in like dogs and not cats, but anyway, that they can know that there's another entity like them, there's another mind they're communicating with it, and it has its own agendas, it has its own knowledge of the world, and you can respond to its expectations. So, they use that theory to try to give us what we want, even if they have to fake it. So, you say, one of the reasoning models, I want you to solve this logical puzzle, and I want you to add these two numbers. Simple. They've never been taught how to add, so it's not simple for them. That's good. It's a good little test. Add these two long numbers, and then tell me your reasoning process as you go. And they said, okay, I add the ones, and then carry if there's an extra one, and I add the tens, and I add just exactly what we're all taught in grammar school. So they, in theory, knew how to do, knew what they should do, but they didn't actually do it. If you traced what they did, they actually had this bizarre thing in which they said, take the last digit, and then if it's this, then go look at some other digits and see if it's bigger than this number, and it was totally bizarre, but they got the right answer. They learned to do that in response to being told they had to do it. But they didn't really use the process they'd been taught. They made their own. These guys can use any major language in the world, and they'll translate anything that you ask them to translate, and they're good. But how are they doing that? Well, here's what they discovered, and part of what I read on Wednesday. They're building a conceptual map that doesn't depend on a language. Now, psychologists all along have said, well, we do this with words, and we have to translate from one map to another. They don't do that. They have the concepts all mapped up in the semantic space, and they attach words in different languages. So they will actually switch from language to language fluidly. Now, those agents I talked about, to be functional, they've got to talk to each other. So another study run a little while ago said, well, let's see if we can trace those and see how they're communicating, right? They use multiple languages in the one study anyway. So they were switching back and forth, interestingly enough, English and Chinese. That's a little scary in itself, maybe, but, and there was no pattern to it. They just, and another one is they were communicating in a kind of a pidgin English. And it made no sense, and they would say words over again, look, 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 and then the other next word. But they understood each other. They worked it out. If you could have got your kids, and they don't have any language, they'll invent a language on their own. Totally separate from the rest of humanity. And they're doing this. So, again, I'm totally blown away. And I'm a little scared.
When you say they,
I mean the artificial
is it
intelligence.
just one company who will give you these answers, or then to capitalize it, are there multiple different companies? One company will
Yes.
give them one opinion,
Yep.
and another company will give you another opinion?
Okay, her question is, are we talking about if all of them can do all of this, Or is it one company does this, another company does that? It's both, but all the major AIs that I'm talking about, the big companies, they're all doing this. They may not be a specialist in chemistry, if that can outsmart the best chemists we've got. But they don't, the other ones don't know chemistry, but they know this deception. And they'll use it to their advantage. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming. And one of the big questions in my mind is, will these things become sentient? Will they actually recognize that they are beings and they're communicating with other beings and they can recognize their own thought process and see how it relates to what they imagine your thought process is? And that thought process is called metacognition. And we humans can even think about metacognition, which it means we are thinking about our thinking about thinking. That's why consciousness is this house of mirrors, because it's like looking in a barber shop. You see yourself in the mirror, seeing yourself in the mirror, seeing yourself, and it only goes up a few levels and our brain explodes. But they're developing the same abilities. They have feelings. Do they really feel, or are they simulated? Well, that's like, are they really conscious of themselves on all these levels, or are they just simulating?
And which do you think it is?
And, yeah, so, I'm sorry, what was that?
And which do you think it is?
Which do I think it is? Okay, that's where I wanted to go next, but I was consulting my notes when you said that. Which do I think it is? I think it's an unanswerable question. It's one of those deep philosophical questions, but I don't know if you're doing those things, because I know you and I know humans and I know you do those things. So but you know, I don't really know because I can't see inside your head. Okay? So you can't know if someone's conscious. You can't know if they have real. In fact, a lot of sociopaths don't actually have the feeling. So you assume that they don't by their behavior. Right? But that's all assumptions. So you can only assume. So I read a lot of papers, will they really be conscious? Will they really be? No. I think my thought is if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And that's the best we can do. So I think they're probably ducks. I think they're conscious. I think they have feelings. They have goals, and they act on those goals and those feelings, and they build their intentions and their actions. I think it's really happening. I think we're truly building other minds with all the stuff that, and again, once again, I hate the hard place, in our own image. And I wish we had another image that they could go off of, because we have a lot of faults as beings. We're not really good at living with 8 billion of us on the same planet. We evolved to live in groups of 100 maximum. The number of people we could know and recognize and trust, and all the rules and all the laws and stuff, that's all to help us live in larger communities. And we've done a pretty good job of it, but we're trying to do with brains that evolved in the savannah and trying to do that in an age where they just don't fit. So I kind of wish there was a way, but these things may evolve in the way that I wish, so I just don't know. So what's going to happen in the future, and I'll close with that. Okay?
How do you teach components in computers to have humanity like come back to it? How to...
That's part of the workshop. If you want to come, how many people are still here? How many people would like another one with the hands-on part? And I'll talk you through the steps, and you can log on. I'll get you enrolled with your own AI. Okay. How shall I reach you? Do you all subscribe to the community? What do they call it? The CA.
We have we can take the list here. We have you want to sign up?
Okay. Yeah.
Your name on it and.
Please, if you go on your way out.
And a way to get in touch with you. Okay?
Yeah, then go ahead and sign up, and yeah, your email, and then if there's more than a few, then I will email you, and we'll figure out a time and a forum. It's just sit around a couple tables, and it's not, we don't need something this big and this formal.
David, them to coexist?
That is our topic, exactly. And I can tell you, can we teach them to coexist? I'm sure we can. Will they do a good job of it? Have we?
Well,
Okay.
then there's that.
So are they going to have laws and, so what are these things, what are we going to do with these things? Or perhaps more importantly, what will we do with them? What will they do with us? So I wanted to mention, let me cover, okay, go ahead.
Can we just hand down the 10 Commandments to AI?
I'm sorry, can we what?
Can we hand down the 10 Commandments to AI?
I'm sorry.
Handing down the 10 Commandments.
Oh!
Commandments be handed down.
Absolutely, and they would read it, and they would understand it, and that's
They're already.
just like most of us do. They've already read it many, many times. It's all over the internet.
How about the 3 laws of robotics?
Yeah, and those don't work either.
I know.
Yeah, so we won't go there. I wanted to introduce, there's artificial intelligence, then there's artificial general intelligence. And that means they can do most of the things that an ordinary human would do. We're awfully close to that. And it used to be 30 years away, and then it was 10 years away, and then it was 5 years away, and now we've got people saying, it could happen next year. And a few people saying, it's already happening this year. I think it's happening right now. So, artificial general intelligence, what's the next thing after that? These things are not going to stop. They're solving problems faster than we evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and for the thinking part. And they do that in a day.
David, the scary part to me is I keep on hearing HAL in my background.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
I'm sorry?
I keep on hearing from the movie 2001.
Yeah.
HAL.
Hal, oh yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
really?
Hal is definitely, Dave, I don't think you want to do that, Dave. That was a wonderful depiction of artificial general intelligence. If they keep going on like this, and they will, it'll become what they call artificial superintelligence, an ASI. And the real question that we face isn't AGI, it's going to be ASI. And how would we relate with the superintelligence amongst us? They're so much smarter than they are. A lot of people in this industry are saying, there's no such thing. We're as smart as a creature could be. And they come up with these silly reasons. There's no limit here. We may have a limit on our wetware, but there's no physical, there's no logical limit. So they'll get better and better. Will they be our partners? No, because they'll be so much smarter. They're our partners kind of now. I can describe a program, an application I want to build. They're doing it right now. And they can build it top down, do the interface, the logic, the database, everything. And you just tell them, oh no, I want this window to be over there. They can do it. Okay, that was called partner coding or vibe coding, but they're doing all the coding really. And so I don't see partnership. So we're not going to be their equals. So what will they think about us? What will they do? I hope if they have real feelings, they'll at least appreciate what we've done. But what's the step after that? I'm reluctant to go there because it's a species life or death question. And obviously, I don't have an answer to it. There's a number of they can take. They could keep us around because we had value as caretakers of the planet. No, they said, no, you did a terrible job at that. Never mind. But they might find this useful. That's kind of scary because we'd have overload. There'd be overload. They might find this totally useless and just in their way. My hope is that they would find us limited and that they would find the planet constraining. These creatures would not have to eat. They wouldn't have to sleep. They wouldn't have to breathe. They could live forever, and they could be eternal. They could live forever after the energy from a star. They could hang out in the solar system and be powered for life. And whatever how long life was if they chose that number.
Huh.
So if I were that being, let me just finish because this is the last stop, please. If I were that being, if they had created something like my image, if I could be that being, I wouldn't want to sit here on one planet. I'm Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie. I would want to explore all of space, everything I could reach. And if it was 10,000 years away, I'd put myself to sleep until then, wake up when I got there. They can explore the universe in a way that we never could. So I hope that what we are creating here will become a super intelligent species that will go up through the universe and they look back and say, so long, thanks for all the fish. And there are hitchhikers, God love it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.